Hello there. I'm working on the Cecil Forsyth Viola Concerto. This is my first day on the job for this piece. It was written in 1903. It's taken me 120 years to get to it, but I'm very happy to be finally getting around to it. I'm looking at it in terms of just trying to figure out some bowings and fingerings and understand what's going on a little bit in the orchestra, so I know when I'm completely unaccompanied, when I have to behave myself rhythmically, if the orchestra has some rhythmic things that I have to fit into. So just looking at it from the very beginning, there's that opening octave passage ending on a 4-note chord in measure 2, and at first it seems obvious that you'd want to start up bow on the 16th note pickup, kind of like this. But then if you do that, you kind of have to do a retake for the 4-note chord. Which isn't the end of the world, of course, that sounds okay. But this is that 16th note pickup figure kind of reminds me of some figures in the second movement of the Bartók Viola Concerto. And I've practiced that a lot over the last 20 years and experimented with all sorts of different bowings. But Primrose's bowing that's in that edition of the Bartók Concerto, he likes to do a lot of bowings, things like that. He has this figure, that sort of thing. And I decided I would try that in the beginning of this. And it turned out after I'd figured this out, I went to watch a couple of videos, and there's at least one video performance of someone playing with orchestra where they do exactly this bowing, although they start right at the frog. It's kind of weird. I start a little bit above the middle of the bow, so that I can play strong on the 16th, but have lots of bow for the dotted quarter afterwards, and then I don't have to do a retake for the chord. Kind of like that. And that works again for this, the pickup to the second line, where you're on the C octave, going to the C sharp octave. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on what bowing to use for those figures. And the fingerings, you don't really have much choice. You're just using 1/4 for the octaves or 3 open when it's the G octave. So that's pretty straightforward. After that, I had to figure out how to make sense of the lento dolce material that comes right after those really strong things. At first, I wasn't paying attention to the dynamics, and I ended up doing, which turned out to be wrong. He's looking for really contrasting characters there, so you have to play with a certain amount of richness because you're a concerto soloist in a big concert hall, but you do want to capture that dolce character. So I have on the C string maybe a bit of a concentrated sound to have some presence, but not a full bow or anything. So I retake after the chord. And you may have noticed in measure 3, after the dotted quarter note, it's printed as a slur up to the D. I actually decided I'd like to mess around and change the bowing a little bit, and I think I can keep it still legato and similar to the gesture that the composer originally intended. So I'm doing with a little bit of sliding to really connect things. So now I'm going to play that whole thing. Oh, I should mention, after the second chord in the forte, this thing, in the higher register, you probably want more bow. So I don't really retake into the lower half. I just start where I am. So you'll see me retake for the first one that starts on the C string. And then for the second one, just stay in the upper half and use lots of bow. Okay. So putting that all together, finding the octaves, it's always a good idea to have a structure to your hand that makes sense and know the intervals in your hand as you work up. So preparing for an octave, I'll usually do something like this, where I'll start on the upper string, just walk up a scale, and then I'm going to do that again and release my third finger and my second finger a little bit so they're not tight. But I know the kind of the overall distance and structure better if I do that. And then as I do that, I'm going to move my first finger over to the C string to catch the low D. Now I have a well-structured hand. I know my distances really well. Hopefully I'm not going to miss anything. Here we go. You may have noticed that in measure 3, I didn't do the bowing that I said I was going to do, where I split the slur. It can work that way too. I made it work, I think. And but you know, first day on the job, you know, not everything goes as planned. Okay, going on from A. This is also quite free because the orchestra starts playing more continuously at A, but they're just doing tremolo. And they don't have many note changes in there, so it's still quite free with just a few note changes that you have to agree with. But as long as you don't do anything really weird, the orchestra is going to be able to follow you, no problem. So from A, I like to start actually in 4th position because I want to come down on the A string, and I didn't like doing a 3-3 slide. I prefer, I can do a little bit more subtle control of the slide if I'm not sliding on the same finger. But I didn't want to start on 4th finger, and I didn't want to go all the way up to 5th position and start on 1. So I'm starting on 2 in 4th position and sliding down to 1st position. So 2, 3. Oh, by the way, in the orchestral score, I noticed that there is actually a tempo marking. This is quarter note equals 88, and that's from the orchestra score. It's not in the viola part. Later in the piece at the Allegro Concerto after D in the orchestra score, there is no tempo marking, so we don't get any direct advice for that section. But for this section, we have something like a tempo. I am not really going to worry about whether I'm playing the right tempo. I'm just kind of playing through it to get to know the piece. So, you know, whatever tempo happens, happens. This is A, 2, 3. I'm going to try that again. Going on. I like to really belt out this next thing. So it's nice to start up on the C string where you can really dig in. Then pretty straightforward shifting down after that. In the 16th note run in the 4th measure of B. It's a little awkward to do that string crossing pattern with the bowing backwards to up bows on the beats. And it's a little awkward to do it high in the bow. So I decided I would do one little slur to start that. And then to make it work out afterwards, I had to engineer one little bowing change in the next group of 16ths. So I just split the first 16th note off by itself, because I really do want to ride down bow there. Okay. And fingering wise, you may notice that I in the passage just before B, I organized to not have 4th finger on any of the high long notes that I really wanted a big vibrato on. Same kind of thing here. I start on a 3. Now here I live with a fourth finger because it's not that long, and I can make it sound good for 1/4 note. Here I'm going up to 3 on A flat, but it's only a little bit above the 3rd position because it looks like 5th position, but it's really kind of a low 5th position, or somewhere up in 4th position if you think of it as a G sharp in terms of physical arrangement. So it's not that big a shift. So and then after that, coming down, I wanted the clarity you get in low positions. I use the open to go up to a B natural, and then it's actually only 2 whole steps in my hand over onto the C string. So that's not a shift. This is a shift here. Then this is the same position. Then I use 2, 2, 3, 1. Okay. The next passage after that, I also start up on a 3 on the C string. It's a C flat, which is the same as a B natural. Then a 3 right away. Back to a 3. I don't know why I'm doing that one different, but it just feels nice, so I'm doing that. Then, so I'm adding the same 2-note slur to make that run of 16th notes a little bit less awkward. And the same thing going up to a 3 for the high note, B flat. So I'll play through this passage, probably a little under tempo, just to make sure I don't mess things up too badly. 2, 3. Oh, by the way, once you're done the first couple notes, the orchestra stops doing anything that you need to worry about. I think they might be holding some long notes, but you're completely free from the end of the 3rd bar of B all the way until the next rest. And then the same thing before C. 1, 2, 3, 4 before C. After the downbeat, the orchestra doesn't do anything other than hold some long notes. So you're, again, completely free until the bar before C. So this is pick up to the 3rd bar of B. 2, 3. Cadenza-like material coming up because, again, after the downbeat of the 2nd bar of C, the orchestra is not playing at all. So you're completely alone until you finish that passage. So you may have noticed 2 before C. It's similar to the spot after B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 after B, the 16th notes. 6 after B, I did that bow change to arrive down bow there. Before C, it's actually not necessary. I feel perfectly fine being up bow the bar before C, and doing the diminuendo down bow actually kind of feels nice. So I don't do that little extra bow change. So just before C, playing the high note, keeping the printed slurs. That's a fun piece to play. You may have noticed I did a few bow changes in the middle of that line. There's this figure. Oh, it wasn't. it's just not quite enough juice to do those slurs in one bow, so I split them. And here, if you do the printed slur, there's this little indication where this is supposed to be like 2 up bows or something. But I found that to be a little bit finicky to do freely and nicely. So I do a bow change in the second group of triplets. So I start the first group of triplets down bow, and where the pattern changes, that's where I do the bow change, which is also where I have a shift. So I can kind of make that work nicely. So that's what I decided to do there for now. Might change all this stuff later. In fact, I usually do. You never know. Okay, going on to the next section. It becomes, after D at the Allegro con spirito, the orchestra starts doing triplets. And so you as the soloist need to behave yourself a lot more in this section. Your rhythm has to be really quite steady. No messing about, because if you've got a bunch of people in the orchestra doing if you do a lot of rubato, that's just going to be a mess in the orchestra. So you don't want to make the orchestra unhappy, and you don't want to make them sound bad, which would make you sound bad also. So pretty straight rhythmically, and you're going to have to really dig and produce a lot of sound, because even if your conductor really harasses the orchestra to try and get them to play soft, there's enough going on here that you're really going to have to play with a very intense, clear sound to cut through the orchestra. So there weren't any bowing changes necessary in this whole section between D and F, so I just do it exactly as printed as far as the bowings go. I made a decision to stay up in third position for the fourth bar after the Allegro. Might sound a tiny bit muddy. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think it works pretty well. Otherwise, pretty straightforward. I go ahead and use an open A string on a long note 2 before F. Here I go. Because it's a pretty loud section, and bright and brash is probably okay. And you can round the sound of that out just by doing a little vibrato against your neck, and maybe just being a little bit careful with the bow. In the context of a really loud section with orchestra, that's not going to get you get any hate mail from the audience. So here we go. I'll just play through this section. Again, a little under tempo. I haven't really practiced it very much. So here we go. 3, 4. That's the first page of the Forsyth Concerto. Really happy to be finally learning it. See you later.